Welcome back to When Harry Met Board Games, where we feed our people with relatable content, and our victory condition is your satisfaction. I'm Harry, and before we go any further, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel and click on that bell notification. That way, when we are doing our thing, YouTube lets you know. Also, check in the description down below for a link to our Patreon and see how you can support this channel. Today, we have another episode of Classic Board Game Corner, where I discuss a classic board game within the board game hobby, the board game industry, and talk a little bit about its history and my personal experiences with the game. So today's game is none other than Citadels, designed by Bruno Faidutis, and I believe that the original publisher was Gluck. And this was first designed and first published in the year 2000. Now, this game was a finalist, a nominee for the coveted Spiel des Jahres award back then. Unfortunately, it had some tough competition and lost out to none other than Carcassonne, right? So we're talking about a massively successful game that basically dethroned this game from the place it would have had otherwise. But this game still sells very well today. It's not a mass market hit the way Carcassonne is. You do not find these in Targets, in Walmarts necessarily. I mean, perhaps you might occasionally, sporadically throughout the different Targets and Walmarts throughout the world, but you don't find them as often as you do a Carcassonne. It has not sold as many copies, but it's still a successful game in its own right. This is a city building game with the role selection mechanism that Bruno Faidutis might have had in some designs prior to this, but this is definitely the game that popularized this classic role selection where players do a little bit of a card draft around the table, but what they're drafting is particular roles that give them not only unique abilities from the other players around the table, but the roles that you select have a numerical value that basically determine the turn order for the main phase of the round once it's executed. Because normally, typically in a Euro style game, the turn order is either simultaneous or one by one, and it's determined by your place on the table, going in clockwise order, and so on and so forth. But not so in this game. You do not necessarily go in clockwise order. You go in numerical value in ascending order based on the roll cards that you select. And some cards earlier on might not be as powerful as the cards later on, but they are detrimental to the people who come later on. So you got to find the right balance, strike the right balance between where do I want to draft, and also not becoming predictable, because as the game progresses, people can have an idea of what card you're going to want to select, and they might even target you based on that. So again, this game innovated this role selection idea, and it has been influential and has, first of all, produced a couple expansions. This system of games, the Citadels system, has produced 2 expansions, and now the modern deluxe edition, so to speak, that was published by Wing Rider Games includes those 2 expansions within the box for a complete product right here. And that's the edition that I own, because once I saw that the 2 expansions came together, I said it was worth paying a little bit more money and having all this content together. And the expansion is very valuable because it adds lots of variety into the different characters, the roles in particular. It adds a few cards as far as the buildings and the unique districts are concerned, but the most valuable aspect of the expansions are those role cards, because not only can you have a new set to work with, but you can mix and match accordingly to create different types of games. And the rule book itself specifies, you know, what type of games you want to have and what characters or what roles you should have within the game in order to have it. You always need to keep the game balanced. You always have to have a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, all the way up to an 8 character. But the way you mix and match them is all according to whether or not you want to have a more cutthroat type of game, perhaps a more friendly peacemaker type of game, and anything in between. So that's really cool, because the original characters, some of them in particular, the thief and the assassin, can be pretty mean, pretty cutthroat, and some players will not gravitate towards that. But if you can move past that, I think that the brilliance of the role selection mechanism is something that can attract and appeal gamers or casual gamers and bring them into the hobby. So not only has this game spawned a couple expansions, a deluxe edition, not only has it managed to stay in print consistently for the better part of over 20 years, but this game has influenced other game designs. Not only has Bruno Faidutis continued to rehash and rework this mechanism with other designs like Fist of Dragonstones and Mission Red Planet, which is a very successful game, other designers have also been influenced by this mechanism, the role selection mechanism. For example, designer Paolo Mori in his Libertalia design. Libertalia is a pirate-themed game, so instead of this medieval city-building theme like we have in Citadels, we have a pirate pillage and plundering theme where players take on the role of pirates and are looting these ships to collect different booty tokens, some more valuable than others. And basically you're using the role selection, but in this game, instead of having 8 roles in the game, there are 30 roles in the game, and each player has their own deck containing those 30 cards. And in the beginning, you draft 9 different role cards, and they're randomly decided, but all players have the same 9. But from round to round, we're going to add some new role selection cards to the person's draft. But each player in each round is going to play 6 of those roles and keep 3. And they're not necessarily going to keep the same 3 as the other players around the table. So the disparity and the difference in each player's card is going to increase from round to round. So by the time you get to the round 3, there is a lot of uniqueness into each personal player's hand of 9 roles to choose from. But again, he borrows the same idea, the idea that actions are triggered in ascending order based on the numerical value of the roles that players have selected. And of course, the end game objective and the theme are different, being pirate themed. But it's really cool. And again, it shows the value of this mechanism that other players have wanted to copy it, borrow it, and utilize it and recreate the same idea, but with their own personal nuances and creative touches to it. So I think that is really, really neat. So again, this game has been influential and has inspired other designers. And I think it's going to continue being a valuable contribution to the board game hobby and something that people could tap into as a resource for game design ideas in years to come. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about my personal experience with Citadels. I've been playing this game for a while, and while I am not as fond of it now as I used to be, for whatever reasons. I think it's because, in essence, it's a city building game, and I do enjoy city building, and there's so many other city building games that do the city building aspect of it better. What it does with the role selection is phenomenal, but yeah, the city building aspect of the game is very simplistic, very basic. It's just simple placing of cards and playing coins. But while I have grown cold on it, it's definitely a game that I don't envision getting rid of from my collection. First of all, because of its classic status, but also because I see this as a game that I want to play with my children when they get older. I see this as a pretty good gateway experience for teaching to other non-gamers, especially, again, if you eliminate some of the meaner roles from the game early on as players are acclimating and being introduced and getting familiar with the game. Perhaps just not making it so mean and cutthroat early on might be conducive to them having an enjoyable experience. So again, I see lots of value in this game. And again, while I'm not exactly as excited about it as I was when I first started playing it, it's still something that I appreciate and see its value in a person's gaming collection, Citadels. And as far as the future of Citadels, I think that Citadels will continue having its place that it has in the hobby right now. It's never going to be, and never has been, again, a mass market hit. It's the kind of game that continues to sell just well enough to stay in print. It's a game that still continues getting some attention from new gamers. Every once in a while, I do see people post about this on Instagram. So it's still gaining attention from people. It's still gaining new fans, but again, not necessarily overwhelming people as far as its popularity is concerned. And who knows, you know, again, there might be an upgraded version sometime in the future. Bruno Faidutis is still actively designing board games. He's still working hard at it. So who knows if he might go back into Citadels and even deluxify it further, add new expansions, maybe a modern edition, or even a spin-off to the game. Who knows? And again, who knows what other designers are going to do with this system, and who can actually take the system and perfect it. Because while I do think that Libertalia is a great design, I still think that there's so much more room for improvement for people to take this mechanism, this role selection mechanism, and run with it going into the future. And that's it for this episode of Classic Board Game Corner. Thank you so much for joining us here. When Harry Met Board Games, consider clicking on one of these videos that you see on the screen right now. Also, check in the description down below for a link to our Patreon account and see how you can support this channel and become more involved with the behind-the-scene process. Research and find a tier that works for you. This is Harry saying take care, everybody. Stay safe, stay healthy, and have fun gaming. Bye-bye.